IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Vince. No, that's Vince. I'm Bryan, and we're ready to talk some Notre Dame football. I'm going to tell y'all how excited we are for this season to get started. Today is that dude's 20th anniversary to his wife, and he's still here doing the show.
That's right.
Didn't even mention like, hey, can I not do this show today? It's just like, let's roll. What time are we going with the show today? We got plenty of time for the anniversary stuff later.
That's right.
But I did want to say to my friend, congratulations and happy anniversary. You know how much I adore you and your wife. I just love your family, and I'm very thankful that you and her are such a great example to your children of what it means to be in a committed, loving relationship and doing this life thing together. So proud of you, happy for you guys, and thank you for being, for your dedication to Irish Breakdown and being here with me today, because I know you're excited about the topics and about buy sell hold. If we weren't doing buy sell hold, it might have been a little iffy if Vince would have been on the show today. But yeah, I'm ready to go.
Hey, no problem. I appreciate it, and all thanks go to the lady that's right about up there upstairs, because she's allowing me to do the show today.
Yes.
Basically,
oh, I already knew that.
Yeah,
you didn't have to ask.
And IB Nation Sports Talk later on.
Yeah,
as
you
well.
didn't have to ask. So, yeah.
So no, it's been a trip. There's no doubt about it. It's scary how fast the years go by, as anybody in the chat or you can attest. I can tell you that it goes by super fast, and of course, 20 years and 5 kids later, and it's like, here we are. So,
and you're getting ready to send your first one off into the world. So
scary. He's over there
making,
he's already making adult decisions and doing stuff that is crazy. And I'm super proud of my other kids as well. And 20 years, man. So here's to many more. And I'm excited to celebrate with her tonight, and did some shopping this morning, and we're going to go out tonight and have a good time. So looking forward to it.
Very nice. So, Vince, yes. Not that that's not an important topic, and we could talk about that the rest of the show, but we've got some other stuff that we want to talk about today. We want to talk about the Notre Dame secondary.
A lot of fun stuff to talk about with the Notre Dame secondary, because it's always fun to talk about position groups that are really good, frankly. And this position group is really, really good. As we were talking about, what we were going to specifically talk about with this group and doing our show prep and everything else. And, and we're going to get obviously to the breakouts, and it's like, wait a second, who can break out? There's already like 2 preseason All-Americans in this group. You know what I mean? And so, having a position group with that kind of talent returning for yet another year, where one of those guys could have left and gone to the NFL and been doing his thing and getting paid even more money than he is now, on an NIL deal, but in Xavier Watts, but he's decided to come back, and he just solidifies, this secondary and what it can be and all of that. And I'll tell you what, I'm excited about this secondary. There's no doubt about it. And I will say that this is a recent feeling, as far as we're talking about the length of time that you and I have been covering Notre Dame. It's not often that we can go into a season with the kind of excitement and confidence in the Notre Dame secondary that we've had over the last couple of years. I'll just say that.
It is wild how quickly things turn around for Notre Dame. And look, there have been seasons where the secondary was expected to be a strength of the team, right? I mean, 2018 is one of those years where, Julian Love had played a bunch. He was coming off of a year where he had 23 passes defense. Troy Pride had kind of, stepped in and into the starting lineup by the end of the year. You loved what Jalen Elliott had done the year before in 2017, his first year really in the lineup. You're getting Alohi Gilman into the mix. That was the first year he was eligible to play after sitting out 2017, because we watched Alohi play against Notre Dame in a game where Navy beat Notre Dame in 2016 as a freshman. So, there was a lot of excitement about what that group could be, and they turned out to be a heck of a team. But then a year later, it's like, okay, you're supposed to be good again. You've got Troy Pride coming back. You lost Julian Love, but you got Gilman coming back, Elliott coming back. You've got Kyle Hamilton. And the secondary wasn't quite as good. They were still good, but they weren't as good as they were the year before. And then in 2020, all of a sudden, just like that, so like you had 2 years in a row where it was good, then just like that, boom, your secondary falls off a cliff a little bit because you lose Pride and you hadn't recruited well enough to reload. And so what this team is in a unique situation, Vince, because we've now had 2 years in a row of the secondary being pretty good.
Yeah.
It was good in 2022. It was great in 2023. And now, can they break the trend of, okay, a couple good years and then fall down, couple good years, then fall down? Or is what we saw last year the beginning of this is just the reality of the Notre Dame secondary? I mean, that's kind of the question mark that we're at.
Sure.
Like, okay, yeah, it feels great that what they've done in the last couple of years, but is Notre Dame in a position to reload? Because in the past, for the past 20 plus years, when they'd lose multiple starters, which they did last year, they lost 3 starters from the secondary. Now, when we talk about starters, we're talking about the 2 safety positions, the 2 corner positions, plus the nickel.
Right.
So you lose Thomas Harper.
This is modern football. Like, you got to count all that.
And Thomas Harper played more snaps than Jack Kaiser did last year. Started more
go.
games than Jack Kaiser did last year.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about who started, was it the nickel or the rover? Well, they started the season more in their nickel defense than they did their rover defense. That was more of their base defense than their quote unquote, their when I say it's not even base anymore, it's basically just their 4-3 defense compared to their 4-2-5 defense. Essentially, is what it is now. Where it used to be, they were a team that was 4-2-5 defense in 4-3 personnel. Now they're a 4-2-5 defense that will also play 4-3 personnel. You look last year, Thomas Harper played 438 snaps. His backup was Clarence Lewis. Clarence Lewis played 236 snaps. I'd say at least half of those came in the slot. Jack Kaiser played 354. So they're in the nickel a lot more than they're in anything else. So that means you lost 3 starters from last year's defense. And is Notre Dame really in a position in the secondary to just reload? We're going to find that out. Now,
60%.
We think that they are, right? And we'll dive in. The show is going to be about giving you the reasons why, but it's also kind of an interesting year, Vince, big picture, because we're assuming a lot about Notre Dame in year 3 of this group, right? And I don't even know if you can even say year 3, but I'll say year 3 because, we did see a lot of Benjamin Morrison in 2022 as a freshman All-American. Xavier Watts, that was his first year kind of in the rotation. So, I mean, I'd say year 3 is fair to say. But can this group build on or at least at minimum sustain what they did last year and then hopefully build on it? Can they reload with a lot of new faces? And it's not even just on the field, Vince. They're going to have a new rover. They're the 2 guys battling for this to start opposite Xavier Watts didn't play at Notre Dame last year much. Zidane Juler played very little, and Rod Hurd was at Northwestern last season and not playing safety. He was playing nickel.
Correct.
And so there's a lot of questions. And the other part too, Vince, is Notre Dame's had one of the best cornerback coaches in all of college football for the last 5 years, right? In Mike Mickens. So 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. This is the 5th year, so the last 4 years. So then the question becomes, okay, can Mike Mickens do for the entire secondary what he did at corner, right? Which is now the entire secondary is going to be incredibly well coached. Or is the entire group going to take a little bit of a hit because he now can't focus all his time at corner and now he's spread a little bit more thin, so to speak. So, that's also a question. Now, I think you and I have our opinions of that, and I, because we've talked about it, we both think that they're going to be fine in that regard, but that's a projection. We got to see it happen now.
And the little bit of practice that we have been able to see, this last practice in particular, I kind of kept an eye on Marty Biaggi. Now, they were just running drills, and they weren't doing a ton of stuff, but I was just kind of watching Marty or Coach Biaggi and just how he was interacting with the safeties, because they were doing position specific, drill work and things like that. And usually he's nowhere to be found. You know what I mean? Like, usually he's with the special teams, the specialists, doing his thing. And obviously this year is different. He's been working with the safeties, and Mike Mickens was off working with the corners and he was working with the safeties. And I mean, not that I would expect anything different as far as what it appeared that the players were respecting him and doing everything that he asked and all that, but he really took control of that position group. I mean, he's barking out orders and he's running around and he's doing all these different things. Now, that's not the be all end all of a coach. Don't get me wrong. And it's just a snapshot, but I liked what I saw.
It's important
in that moment. You know what I mean? Like, he was in complete control of that position group, and guys were flying around and they were doing everything that he asked, and he was coaching them up, and he was very vocal with that group. And again, Does that mean he's a great safeties coach? No,
because
but
he's not the safeties coach. Right, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, he's an assistant, essentially,
right.
a secondary coach or safeties coach.
He's the assistant to the regional manager.
100%. But I liked what I saw in that moment. You know what I mean? And so it gives me some more confidence than I even already had.
We've also seen Al Golden working with that group a lot during individual as well in the different periods. And then when in the one full practice we got, and then when they were doing some team versus team stuff in a couple other practices at the end, Mike Mickens was in charge of the whole secondary.
Okay.
I mean, you know, as far as like telling guys what to do in communication. So, but my concern was in those drill periods, are they being coached the same way? So right now, Mike Mickens, when they're in meetings, he's got the whole room.
Mm-hmm.
When there's certain team things they'll do in pre-practice and individual that he's in control of the whole group. And then when they're in the team stuff, but what about those other times? You know, what about when he's talking to a corner, who's talking to the safeties? Well, there's multiple people involved in that. Al Golden, Marty Biaggi, and then there's a GA whose name I don't know that we've seen with that group as well. Sure. Or he may be an analyst. It's hard to tell now because analysts are now allowed to be on the field coaching. So I don't know if it's a GA or an analyst, but there's someone else there. So there are bodies there. Now we have to find out if this group that's working with them is good, because there's two ways to look at it. One is it's really good when you have one coach that's talking to everybody. Whereas Chris O'Leary did a great job, Mike Mickens did a great job last year, but there were times when when there would be some misses in communication between the two groups because they weren't always going over the game plan together.
Sure.
Because you know how it is, Vince. Sometimes like, hey, I think we're installing this correctly, but you may say something that's not quite what was meant or intended by the other coach, or just some things are different. So when your safeties say something to your corners or vice versa, it may not register right away, and that could create an issue on miscommunication. Sure. Well, now there's no miscommunication because of that. It's just I'm the DB coach, and I'm the one giving these signals, and then Coach Biaggi and these other guys are working you through drills and individual and technique and things like that. And so we need to see it though, right? I mean, so I'm confident it's going to play out well, but now we need to see it. And we need to see if this group can still play at the high level that it did last season when it comes to limiting the big plays, because that's something this secondary was great at last year, especially in the pass game, was limiting big plays. Teams rarely, I'm trying to think of it now, like when Notre Dame gave up a big pass play. When I mean big pass play, I mean like a long pass play, like a play where like they got burned for a big gain that wasn't against their backups. Right. Because I mean, Pitt had a big play against Notre Dame's third string corner last year. I'm more talking about, teams that, games where it was good. So, I mean, you go through last season. I will say this. I'm trying to think of when that was, but I will say this, Vince, Navy should have had one. Navy had a big missed opportunity. That you remember that in the second quarter, I think it was. They had a guy that was pretty open, and they missed it.
Just missed him.
Yeah, they missed it for a big play. So I mean, there just weren't a lot of those opportunities against Notre Dame last year. And I don't remember times when teams were hitting balls down the field against Notre Dame. And I'm going through the season results, and I'm looking at opponents like Tennessee State's longest gain was 22 in the air. NC State's longest gain was 38, and I believe that came late in the game again when the game was kind of no longer in doubt.
Sure.
Central Michigan had a 37-yard gain. I believe that was also late in the game. But again, still not a single 40-yard play yet. Ohio State had one 40-yard gain last year to Xavier Johnson. After that, their next biggest gain was only 23 yards to Emeka Egbuka. Now, that was a big 23-yard gain because it set up the final touchdown. But, let's see, get to the Duke game. Longest was 27 yards. Louisville game, longest was 18 yards. It's the longest play they gave up in the pass game to Louisville. USC, longest pass play was 21 yards to their tight end. Back-to-back games where the longest play given up was to a tight end. Pitt had a 50-yard gain. That's the one I was talking about. That was against a backup. So that's the first time, 9th game of the year, the first time they gave up a play of that big, and it was late in the game against a backup. Clemson's longest gain last year was 18 yards. So we're now multiple games against good teams who went to bowl games where the longest pass play they had was less than 20 yards. Vince, we've seen that multiple times now. Wake Forest's longest gain was 17 yards last season, and then Stanford with Alec Ayamanor gave up a 53-yard gain to a running back out of the backfield. Do you remember that? It was a blown coverage to E.J. Smith out of the backfield. Wasn't against a defensive back. So you just didn't give up big plays. Does that continue this year?
Right.
Do they give up more big plays? Do they make more plays? Is that the new normal against Notre Dame? Or was last year just sort of that everything went right season? That's kind of what we're going to find out, because I don't know that Notre Dame is in a place yet, Vince, where we can just assume that these parts of the team are just going to keep being good. I think we can project it based on what we've seen, the talent coming back, things like that. But this is not a program that over a course of 6, 7, 8 years has just every year shown that, hey, this is what we do. This is who we are.
Exactly.
And so I think this year is big for that. I don't want it to come across like we don't think they can do it, or to diminish what they did last year. It wasn't fluky. Again, they played against Ohio State. They played against Clemson. They played against NC State. They played against Caleb Williams and USC. Like, they played against good teams. And it's okay, but can we be in a situation where this is just the new normal of Notre Dame? Limit the big plays. Like Benjamin Morrison, I think, gave up 3 touchdowns last year. They were all short. 2 of them were like scrambles. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just hard to beat this team through the air. Is that the new normal, or was last year just wow, everything went right for that football team? Which, Vince, let's be honest, we've seen that in the past, where Notre Dame had that kind of everything went right season.
Sure.
And then
2012 was part of that season.
2012 was part of it. I would argue
pieces.
like Bob Diaco's defenses were always good.
Sure.
They were never that good.
Right.
You go back to 2002, that great defense had in 02, 01, 03, not the same. Not even close to the same. Is this just the new normal at Notre Dame, like it is at Iowa, like it is at Georgia, like it is at Ohio State? And I say that at Ohio State because they had a couple down years, but those were the anomalies on defense. And then they fired that D coordinator and hired a guy who has made a career out of putting really good defenses on the field. So there's an assumption that I'm willing to give Ohio State on defense
because of their history.
That we need to, I think Notre Dame is there now too, but I need to see it.
Yeah.
And the secondary is going to be a big part of that.
Right. No doubt about that. It's going to be fun to watch. Obviously, I think the secondary has obviously a lot of talent. There's no doubt about that. They've got a lot of returning talent. They've got a lot of new talent. And the fact that, I hadn't really sat down and really thought about it, but if you assume that there's 5 starting positions, accurate, that the fact that they have to replace 60% of those starters. Now, the 40% that they're returning are really freaking good, but they still have to replace 60%.
But to your point, they weren't great last year in the secondary just because of Xavier Watson, Benjamin Morrison.
Absolutely.
To your point.
Absolutely.
Cam Hart was exceptional. He got drafted. Thomas Harper had an excellent season coming over from Oklahoma State, where he was coached by Jim Knowles. Who's now doing some great things at Ohio State. And then, of course, DJ Brown had the best year of his career, right? So now you say, well, DJ's not as big of a loss because he wasn't as physically talented, but the one thing about DJ was he was always in the right place in the pass game. Now, look, okay, yeah, you got to catch that ball against Ohio State, but again, he was where he was supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And that's what you got to, you've got to try to replicate that some way, somehow, with a much different looking group.
No doubt.
That's going to be the big key. It's going to be a very big key.
So I believe that's the end of part number 1. And so did I forget something?
Nope.
Okay, make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, share with your family and friends. Of course, boards.irishbreakdown.com. There's a wonderful intel piece on there right now about recruiting. You're going to want to be a part of the board, so you can check that out. It's big news. I'll just put it that way. So make sure you are a member of the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com.